What is it about the new Star Wars films, the Disney Star Wars, that has rendered almost all of the prequels to a large degree as almost as sacrosanct as the original property, the original trilogy? Is this because, from what I can remember, the whole world had rallied against George Lucas to a large degree, only because they feel that he'd lost his mojo, that he had not been for some time the master craftsman that we took him for. To what degree his storytelling ability was completely up to scratch is probably debatable, as he had a lot of help with the trilogy after New Hope. But you can't really see that anything has improved, certainly with the Disney films. That doesn't really give a free pass to the prequels, which were pretty dire, patronizing, ill-conceived, terribly acted to a large degree. I know a lot of people liked Ewan McGregor's performance as Obi-Wan. I thought he was fine, but they could have easily found somebody better, or at least found a better director to pull the best out of him. Besides, we have to probably consider that the new films have something which the prequels don't, which is an agenda, a political agenda, an SJW-driven one, which has made the perhaps fall of the Roman Empire type saga of the prequels maybe a little bit more respected in recent times. But let's not run away with the idea that they held up in any way to the original trilogy. I don't think anybody necessarily, in retrospect, considers that it was all that possible to do so. Since they were prequels, we knew what was going to happen, ultimately end to Anakin, etc. But with the new films, with Disney, they seem to have taken it upon themselves to distance themselves from the fan base, at least as far as any criticism is concerned. If we lauded the new films and were completely enamored with their choices in actors, in directing style, scripting wise, they would have been fine with us. We would have probably still been talking as far as a two-way dialogue has ever gone between Disney Star Wars and the fan base. But now we find ourselves wondering, who can save Star Wars? Who can at least give us something as good as the prequels? It's incredible to think that we could even consider that. 10 years ago, people would have thought, somebody else coming in, a fresh pair of eyes. Yeah, that's exactly what we need. And Disney would perhaps not be our first go-to, but we'd probably figure, well, they're fully invested in making this property successful, making it something that the whole world can embrace and that can get the sour taste out of our mouths from the prequels. Let's not forget that J.J. Abrams, his opening line was something to the degree of, "This will go some way to making things better." But much as Force Awakens perhaps tried in many ways to secure that rush, that exhilaration of A New Hope, reintroducing ourselves to a world which is full of mystery, full of exotic species and characters, and something of a degree of verisimilitude with the principal characters. We didn't get any of that. We seemed to get instead something that considered itself, even if it was perhaps a secret only to J.J. Abrams, he knew that he couldn't recreate really this feeling that we all had, and he couldn't draw out of his actors the degree of self-investment that they had in the property. I am sure that everybody here tried their best. We have John Boyega, a new character who everybody perhaps originally thought was going to be the Jedi character. I don't mind that it was switch and bait, and it was Rey who got to be this new champion that we were hoping would bring a new sense of heroism to the property. I don't think anybody had a problem with the new Jedi, principal one being a girl. I think we were all ready to rally behind her. Not Daisy Ridley's fault either. I think she's done everything she could with the chance she's been given. But there seems to have been, I don't like to use the word conspiracy, but let's face it, there doesn't seem to have really been any consideration for what the fans really wanted, which was to reunite the original three principal cast. We had Han Solo, who was dedicated to getting himself capped by the end of the film. So we could have easily had Luke, Leia, Han reunited, going on for one last final hurrah, a new adventure. I don't think anybody would have really batted much of an eyelid if really, as if the film was up to scratch, that they had all been snuffed by the end of the movie, and we were introduced to the people who would take the baton from them, run with it, and give us something new, something that could really open up perhaps this galaxy, this wonderful universe that George Lucas created for us, and could really bring to us everything that we could have hoped that Disney could have done with it. It didn't happen. It isn't happening. I don't see that there's any prospect in that ever happening. I am a comic book creator. I have created my own property, which I wanted to recapture some of that feeling of excitement that I feel has almost been jettisoned in the Star Wars property for the sake of pushing not so much even a hope for better, more tolerant, understanding world. I think what they really are hoping to generate is special dispensation to certain minorities or women who I don't think anybody really can consider a minority, but they wanted to perhaps open up the franchise so that the people who are perhaps less visible in the original movie, the kind of, women, black people, whatever, aliens perhaps given a more prominent role. We didn't seem to really get the latter, but we certainly seem to have gotten an attempt by Disney to promote a feminist angle, which I don't know who exactly in the public sphere was looking for this. I certainly don't even now know much about feminism. I don't know whether it's supposed to be generally a good thing or a bad thing. Is it inclusive of men? Is it considered there should be special rights given to women that they don't have already? But it doesn't matter, because if the movie was good, even if there was a political agenda, even if we wouldn't have noticed. We wouldn't have noticed that they are trying to crack us over the head with saying that, the men, the principal cast of men, they're kind of incompetent. They're not particularly dislikable, but there's nothing to really make you want to gravitate towards them to continue following their not so exciting adventures. Because they seem a little staid. Maybe that would have been okay if Rey had been something approaching the new Luke, or even a new type of Han. But instead, what she seems to have been, as so many of us seem to agree on, is this Mary Sue type character. I know a lot of people consider that maybe Luke was a Gary Stew, but I consider to how he had his ass handed to him so severely, especially in Empire. He barely wielded a lightsaber in the original film, didn't do much other than, to be honest, heroism-wise, other than take down the Death Star, no small deal. But he didn't really seem some sort of invincible kind of like Schwarzenegger archetype or something. He was an everyman that we could all relate to. And if even if we didn't entirely relate to him, we had Han. If that was the kind of the rogue brigand, that was the more favourable prospect of the two for us. We had a choice. Personally, I loved the both of them. I loved Leia. We all did. But now we don't have anybody to love. We have this character Holdo, who, when I first saw the pink hair and the ball gown, I thought that they were going to show us she was some sort of casino owner or something, and she'd be a bit of a sleaze. She turned out to, be a bit of a sleaze, but not in the way certainly I expected. She turned out to be somebody who would always be bringing up Poe for his decision-making, and Leia generally would side with Holdo over this. Even though Poe is very much doing his job, you may consider, which is to defend the fleet, to get them to safety, to keep the Empire at bay and their machines of war at a safe distance. And perhaps he didn't obey orders the way he should have. Should he have been sent to the brig for doing what he did at the beginning of Last Jedi, taking down the dreadnought or whatever it was. When he came back to base aboard the flagship, he was reprimanded. He was given a real dressing down. I could have handled that if there was some kind of balance between the relationship there. But instead, we seem to get almost this implication that, the guys, they've had their time, they've had their chance, we'll take it from here, thanks very much. We could see that, quite possibly Disney is going all out with this so-called agenda, even in the Marvel properties now, with Captain Marvel. We should wait and see. I personally quite like the trailer, but it is unnerving how little emotion, how little there's a capacity to engage us with this character. Nothing's been shown to her that is really remotely relatable, which is perhaps why they crowbarred in Samuel Jackson there again, which he's always good to see, but perhaps enough is enough with his character too. Back to Star Wars, I really think that when they introduced Tico to us, they could have done something, much more interesting with her. They could have retained her, perhaps you'd call it naivety. Her kind of broad notion that the world hinges on a few conceited prospectors who want to capitalize on everybody's suffering, on war, which is obviously supposed to be a correlation with our own military war machines, but really with Rey, with Tico, with Holdo, even with Leia to a degree, we seem to have been presented with Kathleen Kennedy's idea of heroism, Kathleen Kennedy's idea of the kind of world she wants to see, where women will take it from here, as opposed to women and men working together side by side to usher in more hope, more chances that an equality for everybody, where nobody can actually retain or gain a monopoly on rights, on freedoms, or command, or anything else that hasn't been earned. We can assume perhaps Holdo earned the position that she was in, even though Admiral Akbar was snuffed off screen without so much as even a token scene. Didn't bode well, I think, for the future of the movie. It was quite clearly an FU to the fans who felt so fondly for this character with his trademark line. I don't need to say it, I'm sure, but it would have been nice if he'd perhaps managed to even say some variation of that, or even if he said it precisely that way. Perhaps this time it backfires and his warning comes out too late, and the trap is sprung and there's no way out for him. Perhaps Holder tries to save him, fails, and she feels bad about this. She takes on the mantle of Admiral, and Leia, she has faith in her, but there could have at least been something to indicate that Holdo had merited her role. Now, when we find Rose Tico fighting alongside, what is his name? Finn, she seems to be leading him by the nose. She knows better. She knows how the world really works. There's nothing to really show why she should have so much more of an understanding of the world. Certainly Finn, supposedly raised from childhood to be a stormtrooper, he would have presumably seen a lot of the world, regardless of how much the Empire would have attempted to brainwash him into seeing things his way. He would have seen the injustices long before we were introduced to him, and I'm sure that he could perfectly figure out for himself, what side he wants to be on. So this Canto Bight scene with the corny CGI horses and the the casino players and the buffoonery of the guards who were chasing them couldn't even track them down, within their own town. There was a sense that they were kind of treading water. And yeah, it can happen. It can happen to the best of us. It can happen to any kind of movie. But it did labor on way too long. And by the end of it, we were kind of bemused also why she seemed to be more concerned with those horsey creatures than the actual kids, who presumably she would have related to a lot more, perhaps, the slaves. Once again, the child slaves, the slave population are not freed. There seems to be this, just like in the prequels, there seems to be this notion that stuff happens, and there's only so much anybody can do when it comes to human slaves. It's quite a bewildering choice that the properties continue to make. But that aside, let's not forget that when Rose and Finn return to the rebels, having enabled them to escape, that there was something like not even an attempt to build on Rose's character, to get her to learn, to get her to perhaps realize that she doesn't know everything, that the world is not as black and white as she likes to see. Finn could have been the perfect guy to maybe share that with her, so there was more balance between their relationship. They could respect each other's viewpoints at least, or more aware of them. Instead, we are just left to ponder that Finn is just not that strong of a character. Neither is Poe. He just takes his dressing down. He kind of is treated like Leia's bitch in a way, and we lost a lot of respect for him. What modicum of respect we had for him for The Force Awakens, where to a certain degree he was more of a perhaps Gary Stew type character. Now he is rather emasculated, much like Finn, and we are left to hope that this will somehow translate in the new movie into something where we can definitely support all of the principal cast again on an equal basis, including Rose, that we have perhaps our new Holy Trinity or quadrility, whatever the phrase would be. But we are not looking forward to Episode 9 to any degree. I'm pretty sure I can say that's almost a fairly universal notion at the moment, and Disney knows it, which is why they are kind of keeping very hush-hush about this next movie. I know it's another year to go, but let's not forget the way that Lucasfilm have talked to its audience, how it's allowed its actors to denigrate us. This is a first. This isn't something that we've necessarily seen before. This is perhaps Lucasfilm's version of licking its wounds. It is to bite back, as opposed to saying, well, you're the customer, we depend on you to continue to produce these properties, and we may not agree with everything you're saying or asking of us, but we'll listen, we'll take this into consideration. Even if they can concede that the customer is always right, they can at least say, well, maybe the customer is sometimes right about some things, and some things about this movie. Instead, they're just sweeping us aside and saying, no, we know better. There is no prospect of us listening to you because we have the power, we have the keys to the car, and we are going to drive it over the cliff to its fiery death. We don't want to see that happen to Star Wars. Some may consider that's already happened. There is no going back. There is no saving this property. Some people have mooted, perhaps, that Dave Filoni would be the ideal person to come and take over the reins. I am not as familiar with Clone Wars as a lot of people. I did enjoy Rebels to a certain degree, but I wasn't able to stick with it. The animation style and the kind of samey scenery and a few other things that just struck me as a little bit too redolent of A New Hope, as opposed to taking things a bit further. But it's the best I've seen of the property since Return of the Jedi. So certainly in terms of output, I would say Filoni is the safest pair of hands we could hope for. And hopefully by the end of this month, at the latest, I'm hoping January, there might be an announcement that there's been a reshuffle in the staff, and he is now the go-to guy for Lucasfilm, and hopefully Kathleen will have been jettisoned with Rian Johnson officially. None of us know that for sure. A lot of us have speculated for so long. I hope they are, but let's just say that they're not. Let's just say that Rian Johnson and Kathleen are still on board, and this is all a load of hooey that everybody's been speculating about their their soon to depart nature, and now we could be still facing this trilogy of Rian Johnson's, which will be making Kathleen Kennedy so comfortable, as she likes to say. This next trilogy, if it ever happens, could be something that may be at least better than what J.J. Abrams presents to us, if they allowed perhaps somebody to come on board in a kind of co-producer credit. I would again moot Dave Filoni as being this guy, maybe having a more hands-on role than Kathleen, and steering Rian out of his weaker proclivities, drawing out some. There were some things to benefit to credit last year. There were a few scenes that I enjoy. They were sparse, but perhaps somebody who could steer him in the right direction, and batten down his more kind of SJW proclivities to make Kathleen so comfortable, and he could be the Gary Kurtz to perhaps George Lucas. Not that I'm comparing Rian with George, but he could tell him, look, the fans, they don't need to be further disappointed. Give them a break. Let's do some good. Let's do something that they could really rally around again, and let us face the future, which let's say another 3 films. God knows how long that may be. So it might be quite a long future still in Rian's hands. I hope not, but if it is, perhaps it's not the end of the world for this property, for Star Wars. Maybe we can still see it saved to some degree. I don't know if Episode 9 is going to be the movie to do that. It's unlikely, because I don't get the impression that J.J. Abrams has listened to anybody. He is certainly very much of a yes man still to Kathleen, and he is just like a marionette for her. He's a journeyman. He is workmanlike. He's not an auteur. He imitates the great auteurs of the past who he has been so fond of, but he is not able to emulate originality, and he's not able to generate a creative idea which has any capacity to thrill or intrigue. As far as I'm aware, there was some interest, I guess, with Rey. With who her parentage was, the mystery box idea. How did the lightsaber get in that literal box in Maz Kanata's cantina? That was fairly interesting, but I think we knew, from previous output from J.J. Abrams that he doesn't actually know where he's going, and you kind of need to know where you're going to some degree to have to formulate a narrative which people are able to hang on to be invested in. Now, I've gone on for long enough, but I hope that you feel that something that I've said here chimes with you. Let me know, and let me know if I am way off base in any of the things that I've been saying. I'd love to hear from you, and see you around.